The knife moved through the purple vegetables with practiced ease. Walter had been chopping the same way for 40 years, first on Earth, then on colony stations, and now here in his own restaurant. The rhythm never changed. Chop, slide, chop, slide. The sound filled the kitchen of the hearth like a heartbeat. Granite lay near the prep station, his massive body taking up half the floor space. The creature's stone-gray scales caught the light from the overhead panels. He was dozing, his thick tail curled around a support beam. Every few minutes his nostrils flared, tracking the smells of cooking food. "Walter, Table 7 wants extra sauce on their protein bowls," Bryn called from the line. The Corvalli had 4 arms and used every one of them while cooking. His species was known for efficiency, which made him perfect for the dinner rush. "Tell them yes, but charge extra," Walter said without looking up. His hands kept moving, turning the vegetables into perfect cubes. Dews worked at the washing station, his tentacles scrubbing pots with methodical patience. The Hectari never complained, never rushed, just cleaned everything until it shined. Walter appreciated that kind of steady work. The new server pushed through the kitchen doors carrying a tray of empty plates. Tessa was young, barely 20 in human years. Her pillar and features were delicate, with large eyes that seemed to notice everything. She had only been working at the hearth for 3 weeks. She set the plates down and glanced at Granite. The creature had opened one eye, watching her with the patient intelligence that most people found unsettling. "Does he ever move?" Tessa asked. "When he needs to," Walter replied. "Mostly he just keeps me company." Tessa moved closer to Granite, studying him. Her eyes fixed on the thick scar that ran across his snout, a pale line against the darker scales. 3 claws were missing from his front left foot, leaving smooth stumps where they should have been. "What happened to him?" she asked. The kitchen went quiet. Bryn's 4 arms stopped moving. Dew's tentacles froze mid-scrub. Even the background hum of the ventilation seemed to fade. Walter's knife paused above the cutting board. "I mean, if you don't mind me asking," Tessa added quickly. "He just looks like he's been through something." Bryn made a small clicking sound, his species' version of a warning. Tessa didn't understand it. She was 2. New to know the rules. The first rule of working at the hearth was simple: never ask Walter about his past. Walter set down his knife carefully. He turned to look at Granite, and the old creature lifted his head, meeting his gaze. Some conversation passed between them, wordless and complete. "That scar," Walter said slowly, "isn't just on him, it's on both of us." He walked over to Granite and placed his hand on the creature's head. Granite rumbled, a sound like distant thunder. "You really want to know?" Walter asked. Tessa nodded, then hesitated. "Only if you want to tell it." Walter looked at the clock. 2 hours until the dinner rush ended. The kitchen needed to keep moving, needed to keep feeding the 100 customers who would come through their doors tonight. But some stories had weight to them. Some stories needed to be told when the moment came, not later, not never. "All right," he said, "but everyone works while I talk. Bryn, start the protein for the evening specials. Dews, we need those pots clean in 20 minutes. Tessa, you're on vegetable prep with me." They moved to their stations. Walter picked up his knife again and the rhythm returned. Chop, slide, chop, slide. 15 years ago, I worked on Harvest Station, Walter began. Remote colony, about 200 people. They were terraforming a moon, trying to make it livable for agriculture. I ran the kitchen, fed everyone 3 meals a day. Tessa started washing the vegetables he had cut. She didn't interrupt. "Found Granite in the biodome," Walter continued. "Someone had smuggled an egg onto the station, probably for the black market. It hatched before they could sell it. He was maybe this big." Walter held his hands a foot apart. "Just a little thing all alone." Granite made a soft sound, almost like a sigh. "Kept him in the kitchen storage area, fed him scraps, watched him grow. He got big fast. Earth reptiles do that when they have enough food. Within a year, he was too large to hide." "Did you get in trouble?" Tessa asked. "Some," Walter admitted. "But by then, everyone knew him. He was gentle, never caused problems, helped me move supplies, kept the rats out of storage. The station director decided to let it go. Bryn worked the grill, his 4 arms flipping proteins in perfect sequence. But Walter knew he was listening. They were all listening. Harvest station was quiet, Walter said. Boring even, same routine. Every day, wake up, cook breakfast, prep lunch, make dinner, nothing ever happened. He paused, his knife hovering over the cutting board. Until the red chain came. The kitchen seemed colder suddenly. Tessa stopped washing vegetables. Even Dews had slowed his cleaning. Raiders, Bryn asked quietly. Walter nodded. They wanted the terraforming equipment, worth millions on the black market, and the genetic seed banks. Those were priceless. His hands started moving again, faster now. The knife bit into the vegetables with more force. The station's security team was 4 people. The raiders were 20, maybe more. They hit us during the night shift when most of the colony was sleeping. Took out communications first, then power to the security station. By the time anyone knew what was happening, they were already inside. Granite stood up slowly, his massive body unfolding. He moved next to Walter and sat, pressed against his leg. The old human reached down and touched the scar on the creature's snout. "This scar," Walter said softly, "is where everything changed." The alarm had woken Walter at 400 hours, same as always. He remembered that morning clearly, even 15 years later. The kitchen had been dark except for the emergency lights. Harvest Station ran on minimal power during night cycles to save energy. Walter had started the coffee maker and begun pulling ingredients from storage. Breakfast for 200 people required preparation. He worked alone most mornings, enjoying the quiet before the chaos of the day began. That was when he heard the scratching at the storage room door. Granite had grown enormous by then, nearly 8 feet long from snout to tail. The biodome had given him plenty of space to roam during the day, but at night he always returned to the kitchen. Walter had built him a sleeping area in the back, near the walk-in freezer. "You're up early," Walter had said, unlocking the door. Granite pushed through and went straight to his food bowl. Walter laughed and filled it with the protein scraps he saved from dinner service. The creature ate with focused intensity, his powerful jaws making short work of the meal. The station had been peaceful then. Walter remembered thinking how lucky they were. No pirates, no equipment failures, no drama. Just the slow work of turning a dead moon into something that could grow food. He had been mixing batter for breakfast cakes. When the lights went out, total darkness, the kind that only happened when main power failed completely. Emergency systems should have kicked in within seconds. They didn't. Walter stood frozen, his hands still in the mixing bowl. The only sound was Granite's breathing in the darkness. Then the screaming started. It came through the comm system, distant voices shouting in panic. Weapons fire. The distinctive crack of plasma rifles. Someone yelling to lock the doors to get to the safe rooms. Walter pulled his hands from the batter and wiped them on his apron. His heart hammered in his chest. He moved through the dark kitchen by memory, finding the emergency locker where they kept basic supplies. His fingers found a hand light. He clicked it on. Granite stood at attention, his head lowered, body tense. The creature sensed danger even if he didn't understand what was happening. The comm system crackled. A voice came through, cold and unfamiliar. "All colonists will move to the main habitat ring. Now, anyone who resists will be shot. This station is under our control." Walter knew that voice didn't belong to station security. The accent was wrong, the tone too calm. Pirates, raiders, whatever they called themselves, they were here for the equipment. He moved to the kitchen's viewing panel and looked out into the corridor. Through the reinforced glass, he saw colonists being herded past. 3 raiders in black armor walked behind them, weapons raised. Walter recognized faces in the crowd. Dr. Hirsch, who always asked for extra vegetables. The Rodriguez family, including their 2 children. Old Peterson, who worked in hydroponics and told terrible jokes. They all looked terrified. One of the raiders hit a man who walked too slowly. The colonist fell and his wife screamed. The raider kicked him until he stood up again. Walter felt something cold settle in his stomach. These weren't professionals here for a clean theft. They were thugs who enjoyed the violence. He backed away from the viewing panel and looked at Granite. The creature watched him with those intelligent eyes, waiting for direction. "We need to hide," Walter whispered. He led Granite deeper into the kitchen, past the storage areas to the service tunnels. Every station had them, narrow passages that let maintenance crews access the infrastructure without disturbing the main corridors. Walter had mapped these tunnels during his first year on Harvest Station. He liked knowing the bones of a place, understanding how things connected. They climbed down a ladder into the tunnel system. The hand light cut through the darkness, showing pipes and cables running along the walls. Granite followed, moving with surprising grace for his size. Walter heard footsteps above them. The raiders were searching the kitchen now. "Nothing here but cooking gear," a voice said. "Check the storage areas. Station manifest says they keep valuable chemicals for food processing." Walter kept moving through the tunnels. He knew where they led. The central hub, the biodome, the generator rooms. He could navigate the entire station without using the main corridors. But where could he go? The raiders controlled everything. The colonists were being held in the habitat ring. Communication was down. Even if he could get a message out, help wouldn't arrive for days. He stopped at an intersection and sat down against the cold metal wall. Granite pressed against him, offering warmth. Walter closed his eyes and tried to think. He was a cook, 55 years old, slightly overweight with bad knees and worse eyesight. He had served in the military 40 years ago, but that was different. That was training exercises and peacetime duties. He had never actually fought anyone. The smart thing would be to hide until help arrived. Stay in the tunnels, keep quiet, wait for rescue. But he kept seeing Peterson getting kicked. The Rodriguez children crying, Dr. Hirsch's face pale with fear. 200 people, his people. He cooked for them every day, learned their preferences, heard their stories. They weren't just colonists, they were his community. Walter opened his eyes and looked at Granite. "I don't know if I can do this," he said quietly. Granite rumbled, a low sound that vibrated through the tunnel. Walter stood up. His knees protested, but he ignored them. He had spent years in this kitchen, mastering heat and timing and the chemistry of cooking. Fire, knives, pressure, temperature. A kitchen was full of dangers if you knew how to use them. Maybe a cook could be more than just a cook when he needed to be. He started moving through the tunnels again, but this time with purpose. He was heading back to the kitchen. Back to his tools. The kitchen was empty when Walter climbed back through the service hatch. The raiders had already searched it and moved. On, he could hear them in the distance, boots echoing through the corridors, shouting orders at terrified colonists. Walter moved quickly to his workstation and opened the lower cabinets. Inside were his knives, each one perfectly maintained. He selected 3, a chef's knife, a boning knife, and a small paring blade. The weight felt familiar in his hands. Granite watched from the shadows, understanding that something had changed in his human. Walter's mind worked through the problem like he was planning a dinner service. The raiders had numbers and weapons, but they didn't know the station. They were moving in predictable patterns, securing areas one section at a time. He could use that. First, he needed to create confusion, make them think they were facing organized resistance instead of one old cook and his pet. Walter went to the chemical storage and pulled out 3 containers: cleaning solution, cooking oil, and industrial degreaser. Dangerous separately, potentially explosive when mixed incorrectly. He had memorized the safety protocols years ago. Now he was going to ignore every single one. He rigged a timer from the kitchen equipment, the kind used to remind him when bread was done baking. Simple technology, but reliable. He set it for 10 minutes and placed it next to his chemical mixture in the service tunnel junction. Then he and Granite moved through the tunnels toward the power distribution center. They passed under the habitat ring. Walter could hear voices above, frightened conversations. The raiders had locked the colonists in the main meeting hall. At least they were all together, easier to protect if he could create the right opportunity. The power center was guarded. Walter watched through a grate as two raiders stood by the entrance, weapons ready. They looked bored, not expecting trouble. Walter checked his watch, 5 minutes until his timer went off. He used the time to move into position. There was a maintenance shaft that opened directly into the power center, designed for emergency repairs. He and Granite climbed down silently. The explosion, when it came, was smaller than Walter hoped, but louder than he expected. The boom echoed through the station's metal corridors like a gong. The two guards ran toward the sound, leaving the power center undefended. Walter emerged from the maintenance shaft and went to the main control panel. He didn't try to restore full power. That would alert the raiders immediately. Instead, he started cycling power on and off in random sections. Lights flickering, doors locking and unlocking, life support alarms triggering. Chaos. He heard shouting in the distance. The raiders were confused, splitting up to investigate different problems. Good. Walter and Granite slipped back into the tunnels and moved toward the next target. He had counted at least 20 raiders during their initial sweep. He needed to reduce those numbers. The first one he found was alone, investigating a flickering light panel in a side corridor. Walter came up behind him silently. Years of moving quietly in kitchens, trying not to wake the early sleepers, had taught him how to step without sound. The raider never heard him coming. Walter didn't let himself think about what he was doing. He just moved, the way he moved when filleting fish or breaking down meat. Quick, efficient, necessary. The raider dropped without making a sound. Walter took the man's communicator and weapon. He didn't know how to use the rifle properly, but the communicator would let him hear their conversations. He moved on, Granite following like a shadow. The second raider was investigating the chemical explosion site. Walter let Granite handle that one. The creature moved with terrifying speed when he wanted to, and the raider's scream was cut short. 2 down, 18 to go. But then Walter heard something on the communicator that made his blood freeze. Boss wants the equipment loaded in 30 minutes. After that, we start shooting hostages until someone tells us where the backup generators are. 30 minutes. Walter's careful plan of picking them off one by one wouldn't work. He didn't have time. He needed something bigger. The biodome was 3 levels up, a massive space where they grew supplemental crops and kept livestock. Walter had an idea, but it was insane. He ran through the tunnels with Granite at his heels, climbing ladders and squeezing through tight spaces. His lungs burned and his legs ached, but he didn't stop. The biodome entrance was locked. Walter used the stolen rifle to shoot out the control panel. Not subtle, but it worked. Inside, the biodome was dark except for the emergency growth lights. Trees from Earth stretched toward the curved ceiling. Crops grew in ordered rows. And in the livestock section, the animals moved restlessly, sensing trouble. Walter opened every pen. Chickens, goats, 2 cows, and the prize specimens, 4 razorbacks from Earth. The pigs were massive, aggressive, and had been brought to test how Earth livestock adapted to low gravity. They adapted well, too well. Walter climbed onto a maintenance platform as the animals flooded into the biodome. Then he opened the main doors leading to the corridor. The chaos was immediate and beautiful. Raiders found themselves facing confused chickens, angry goats, and 4 very territorial pigs who had been cooped up too long. The razorbacks were particularly enthusiastic about their freedom. Walter watched from above as 3 raiders ran past, chased by livestock. It would have been funny if the stakes weren't so high. But then he heard boots behind him. He turned to find 5 raiders on the platform, led by a woman with a scarred face and cold eyes. "Found the troublemaker," she said into her communicator. She looked at Walter with contempt. "You're the cook, aren't you? Saw your picture in the personnel files." Walter raised the stolen rifle, but he had never trained with weapons properly. His hands shook. The leader smiled. "Drop it, old man, unless you want your animal friend to die first." 3 rifles pointed at Granite. Walter lowered his weapon. The leader kept her rifle trained on Granite while her team surrounded Walter. She was calm, professional, and clearly the one in charge. Her armor had modifications the others lacked, and her weapon looked expensive. "You've caused us a lot of trouble, Cook," she said. "Cost me 2 crew members and about 15 minutes. That's coming out of your hide." Walter stood slowly, hands raised. His mind raced, looking for options. The platform was 30 feet above the biodome floor. Below, animals still ran wild through the crops. No way down except the ladder, and the raiders blocked that. Granite growled, a sound that vibrated through the metal platform. "Shut that thing up," the leader said, "or I'll do it permanently." Walter placed his hand on Granite's head. The creature quieted but remained tense, muscles coiled. "Smart," the leader said. "Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with us to the habitat ring. You're going to tell your colonist friends to cooperate. And if they don't, we start shooting people, starting with you." She gestured to 2 of her crew. "Bind him, kill the animal." "Wait," Walter said quickly. "I can help you." The leader raised an eyebrow. "Help us how?" "The backup generators," Walter lied. "I know where they are, not on the station manifest, but I helped install them. Take me and I'll show you." It was a gamble. The station didn't have secret backup generators, but raiders like this valued equipment, and the promise of more valuable salvage might buy him time. The leader studied him for a long moment. Then she lowered her rifle slightly. "You have 5 minutes to prove you're useful. After that, you and the lizard both die." She nodded to her crew. 2 of them grabbed Walter and pulled him toward the ladder. The other 2 kept their weapons on Granite. Walter caught Granite's eye as they dragged him away. He tried to communicate something, anything. "Stay calm, wait for the moment, trust me." He wasn't sure the creature understood. They descended the ladder, the raiders keeping close. Walter's mind worked frantically. He needed to get them away from Granite, needed to create separation. "The generators are in sublevel 3, Walter said, "near the water processing plant." The leader spoke into her communicator. "Change of plans. Taking the troublemaker to sublevel 3. Meet us at the habitat ring in 20 minutes with the hostages." 20 minutes? That was all the time Walter had to work with. They moved through the corridors, weapons pressed against Walter's back. He led them toward the lower levels, taking the long route, buying seconds wherever he could. Sublevel 3 was cold and damp. Water dripped from pipes overhead. The processing plant hummed in the distance, its automated systems still running despite the chaos above. "Where?" the leader demanded. Walter pointed to a maintenance room. "Through there, behind the filtration tanks." 2 raiders went in first, weapons ready. They found only old equipment and spare parts. The leader grabbed Walter by his collar and slammed him against the wall. "You lied." "No," Walter gasped. "Wrong room, next one over." She hit him hard across the face. Pain exploded through Walter's jaw, and he tasted blood. "Last chance, Cook." Walter pointed with a shaking hand to another door. The raiders checked it, also empty. The leader raised her weapon to Walter's head. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Then the lights went out. Total darkness, the same as when the raid started. But this time Walter had expected. He had been counting in his head, timing the power cycles he had programmed earlier. He dropped and rolled, feeling the heat of weapons fire pass over his head. The raiders shouted, switching to their helmet lights. But Walter knew this level in the dark. He had worked here for 5 years. He ran. Behind him, the raiders gave chase. Their lights cut through the darkness, searching. Walter ducked behind a water tank, then sprinted down a side passage. A shot grazed his shoulder. He felt the burn but kept moving. He needed to get back to Granite, needed to make it to the biodome before the 20 minutes expired and they started killing hostages. But 3 raiders were between him and the ladder up. Walter pressed himself into a narrow gap between 2 pipes. The raiders spread out, searching methodically. They knew he couldn't hide forever. Then Walter heard something that made his heart stop. A roar, not from the biodome above, but from somewhere close. The sound echoed through the sublevel corridors, making the raiders freeze. Granite had found a way down. The creature emerged from a side passage, moving fast. He was bleeding from a cut across his snout, a fresh wound that hadn't been there before. One of the raiders must have gotten a shot off before Granite escaped. The sight of the wound did something to Walter. All the fear, all the hesitation burned away in an instant. These people had hurt his friend. Walter came out of hiding and rushed the nearest raider. The man turned, surprised, and Walter tackled him with all his weight. They went down hard on the metal floor. Walter had never been a fighter, but he had spent 40 years working with knives, developing grip strength and precision. He knew where to strike to make someone stop moving. The raider stopped moving. Granite hit the other 2 like a landslide. His jaws closed on one's arm and the man screamed. The other raider fired, but the shots went wild in panic. Walter grabbed the fallen raider's weapon and pulled the trigger. He had no idea how to aim properly. The rifle kicked hard against his shoulder, but at close range it didn't matter. The second raider fell. The leader emerged from the maintenance room, weapon raised. She saw her crew down and her face twisted with rage. "You're dead, old man." She aimed carefully, professionally. Walter knew he wouldn't survive the shot. Granite charged. The leader turned and fired a plasma cutter instead of a rifle. The beam sliced across Granite's face, cutting deep into his snout and through 3 claws on his front foot. The creature screamed, a sound Walter had never heard before. But Granite didn't stop. He crashed into the leader with enough force to crack her armor. She went down and didn't get back up. Walter ran to Granite. The creature collapsed, bleeding heavily from the wounds. "No," Walter whispered. "No, please." The lights came back on. Somewhere above he heard shouting. The colonists fighting back now that the raiders were scattered and confused. But Walter didn't care about any of that. He held Granite's massive head in his lap, watching blood pool on the floor. "Stay with me," he said. "Please stay with me." Dr. Hirsch arrived within minutes. Someone had radioed her from the habitat ring after the colonists overwhelmed the remaining raiders. She came running with her medical kit, 2 assistants behind her carrying emergency equipment. "Move aside, Walter," she said, kneeling next to Granite. Walter didn't want to let go. His hands were covered in blood, his friend's blood, and he felt like if he moved, Granite would disappear. "Walter," Hirsch said more firmly, "let me work." He stepped back slowly, his whole body shook. Hirsch examined the wounds with quick, professional movements. The cut across Granite's snout was deep, nearly to the bone. The missing claws had been severed cleanly by the plasma cutter's heat, which meant no chance of reattachment. "He's in shock," Hirsch said. "Losing blood fast. I need to stabilize him here before we move him." Her assistants unpacked equipment. IVs, pressure bandages, monitors. They worked around Granite's massive form, treating him like any other patient even though nothing in their training had prepared them for this. Walter watched, feeling useless. His shoulder still burned from the graze he had taken, but he ignored it. All that mattered was Granite. Above them, he could hear colonists moving through the station. They had taken control after Walter's chaos gave them the opening they needed. Someone named Rodriguez, the man Walter had seen get kicked earlier, had led the counterattack. Turned out the quiet farmer had military training from 20 years back. The raiders were being rounded up, their weapons confiscated. Station security, what was left of them, were regaining control. But Walter didn't care about any of that. "Is he going to make it?" he asked quietly. Hirsch didn't answer right away. She kept working, her hands steady as she sealed the worst of the bleeding. "I don't know," she finally said. "I've never treated anything like him. His biology is close enough to Earth reptiles that I can make educated guesses, but I'm working blind here." "Please," Walter said. It was all he could manage. Hirsch looked up at him, her expression softened. "I'll do everything I can." They moved Granite to the medical bay 2 hours later. It took 8 people and an improvised stretcher. The creature never woke during the transfer, kept unconscious by medication. Walter followed, refusing to leave his side. The medical bay became Hirsch's laboratory for the next 3 days. She consulted every database she could access on Earth reptiles, called in favors from colleagues on other stations, worked 18-hour shifts without rest. Walter stayed in a chair next to Granite's bed. He didn't eat much, didn't sleep much, just watched his friend breathe, counting each breath like a prayer. Other colonists came to visit. They brought food, offered words of support. Many of them cried, not just for Granite, but for everything that had happened. 47 dead. The raiders had killed them during the initial assault, before Walter's chaos had given the colonists a chance to fight back. 47 people who would never eat another meal, never see another sunrise. Walter knew some of their names, remembered their favorite dishes, their complaints about the food, their jokes at breakfast. He had failed them. "You saved 153 people," Rodriguez said during one visit. The farmer sat down next to Walter, his own arm in a sling from the fighting. "That's what matters." 47 people died," Walter replied. "They died before you did anything. The raiders killed them in the first 5 minutes. Rodriguez leaned forward. "You stopped it from being 200. Walter didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a cook who had gotten lucky and lost a lot of people along the way. On the 4th day, Granite opened his eyes. The creature made a soft sound, confusion and pain mixed together. Walter was at his side immediately, hand on his head. "I'm here," Walter said. "You're safe." Granite tried to move, but Hirsch had restrained him gently with medical straps. He couldn't. Hurt himself by thrashing. "The wounds are healing," Hirsch said. She looked exhausted but relieved. "Better than I hoped. His biology has some remarkable regenerative properties. He'll live." Walter felt something break inside him. All the fear and tension of the past 4 days came out at once. He put his head down on the edge of the medical bed and sobbed. Granite rumbled, a weak sound but definitely concerned. His tail moved slightly, trying to reach Walter. "He'll need time to recover," Hirsch continued. "The scarring will be permanent, the claws won't grow back, he'll probably limp for the rest of his life." "I don't care," Walter said through his tears. "He's alive." The recovery took months. Granite had to learn to walk again with his damaged foot. The scar across his snout pulled tight when he opened his mouth, causing discomfort. He would never be as fast or as graceful as he had been. But he was alive. Walter stayed with him through every day of recovery. They moved through the station together, slowly, taking their time. The colonists had voted to name Walter a station hero, but he refused the ceremony. He just wanted to be left alone with his friend. 6 months after the raid, a transport ship arrived to take survivors to a new colony. Most people chose to leave. Harvest Station held too many bad memories. Walter decided to leave too. He couldn't stay in the place where Granite had been hurt, couldn't walk past the sub-level corridor where the blood had pooled. They boarded the transport together. Granite moved carefully up the ramp, his limp pronounced but manageable. Someone asked Walter where he was going. "Away," he said, "somewhere quiet." He spent the next 15 years drifting from station to station, working in kitchens, keeping his head down, avoiding questions about his past. Granite stayed with him always, a reminder of what violence cost. Eventually, they found Way Station Meridian, found a small restaurant space for rent, started over. Started the hearth, and tried to forget. The kitchen was silent after Walter finished speaking. His hands had stopped moving during the last part of the story. The vegetables sat half-chopped on the cutting board, forgotten. Tessa had tears running down her face. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I shouldn't have asked." Walter looked at her, then at Bryn and Dews. They were all watching him with different expressions: sadness, respect, understanding. "Don't be sorry," Walter said quietly. "You asked about a scar and learned something true. That's worth more than staying comfortable." He picked up his knife again and resumed chopping. The rhythm returned, steady and familiar. Chop, slide, chop, slide. Bryn returned to the grill, his four arms working in practice sequence. But he moved differently now, more carefully, like he was cooking for someone he respected instead of just doing a job. Dews spoke for the first time in the conversation. His voice was soft, thoughtful. "You protected them, the colonists. You did what you could." "I did what I had to," Walter corrected. "There's a difference." Tessa brought more vegetables to the prep station. She worked next to Walter, matching his pace. "Why did you open a restaurant?" she asked. "After everything that happened, you could have done anything, gone anywhere." Walter considered the question while he worked. It was something he had asked himself many times over the years. "Because feeding people is honest work," he said finally. "You take ingredients, apply heat and skill, and create something that nourishes. No politics, no violence, no complicated moral questions, just food." "But you were a hero," Tessa insisted. Walter set down his knife and turned to face her. "Listen carefully," he said. "Heroes are people who do impossible things and make it look easy. I did impossible things and barely survived. I watched people die. I killed other people. I got my best friend permanently injured. None of that is heroic, it's just desperate." He gestured around the kitchen. "This is what I chose after the desperation. This place, this work, it's my way of protecting people now. Not with violence, but with warmth and full bellies and a place that feels safe." Granite stood up from his spot near the prep station. He walked over to Walter, moving with his characteristic limp. The old creature pressed against his human's leg, offering comfort. Walter reached down and ran his hand over the scar on Granite's snout. "We carry these scars because we tried to protect people we cared about," he said. "The scars don't make us heroes, they just make us people who survived something hard." The dinner rush began right on schedule. Customers started filling the dining area looking for their usual tables. The hearth had a reputation for good food and a comfortable atmosphere. People came here after long shifts, after bad days, after losses and victories. They came here to be fed. Walter and his team moved through the rush with practiced efficiency. Orders came in, food went out. The kitchen filled with the sounds of cooking, sizzling protein, boiling water, timers chiming. Tessa worked the line with more confidence now. She had learned something today beyond how to prep vegetables properly. She had learned that every person carried stories, that scars meant survival, and that protecting people came in many forms. During a brief lull, an older customer called Tessa over to his table. She recognized him as a regular who came in 3 times a week. "Is everything okay with Walter?" he asked quietly. "Saw him through the kitchen window. He looked upset earlier." Tessa smiled. "He was just remembering something, but he's fine now." "Good, this place wouldn't be the same without him." The customer paused. "Tell him the soup was perfect tonight, best I've had." Tessa brought the compliment back to the kitchen. Walter nodded, accepting it with quiet satisfaction. "Table 12 wants to know if you can make the soup a little spicier tomorrow," she added. "Tell them yes, I'll adjust the recipe." Simple conversations, simple requests, the normal rhythm of a restaurant doing what it was meant to do. After the rush ended and the last customers left, the team cleaned the kitchen together. Bryn washed the grill, Dews handled the dishes, Tessa wiped down the prep stations. Walter stood at the door, looking out at the empty dining area. Granite sat beside him, both of them tired but content. "You thinking about Harvest Station?" Bryn asked, his voice gentle. "Sometimes," Walter admitted, but less than I used to. This place has its own memories now, better ones. He thought about the customers who came here regularly, the young couple celebrating their anniversary last week, the tired worker who always ordered the same thing and fell asleep in the corner booth, the group of students who studied here while eating their meals slowly to make them last. All of them were people he fed, people he protected in his own way. Tessa came over, drying her hands on her apron. "Can I ask you one more question?" she said. Walter braced himself, expecting something about the raid or the violence or the guilt. "What's your favorite thing to cook?" she asked instead. He blinked, surprised. Then he laughed, a real laugh that felt good in his chest. "Bread," he said. "Simple wheat bread. You mix flour, water, yeast, and salt, apply heat and time. It becomes something that feeds people and makes them happy. No complexity, no drama, just honest transformation." "That's beautiful," Tessa said. Walter shrugged. "It's cooking, it's what I do." They finished cleaning and locked up the hearth for the night. Walter and Granite walked through the station together, heading back to their small apartment. Other people passed them in the corridors, some nodding hello, others too busy to notice. Nobody knew that the old cook with the scarred creature had once fought raiders and saved a colony. Walter preferred it that way. He had been a desperate man who did desperate things when he had no choice. Now he was a cook who made good food and provided a warm place for people to gather. The second version was who he wanted to be. Back in his apartment, Walter prepared Granite's dinner. The creature ate slowly, his damaged jaw making the process take longer than it used to. Walter sat down with his own simple meal and thought about the story he had told today. 15 years of running from those memories, 15 years of trying to forget. But maybe the memories weren't something to run from. Maybe they were just part of his story, like the scar was part of Granite's face. They had survived something terrible together and come out the other side changed but alive. The scars didn't define them. The choice to keep going defined them. Walter finished his meal and cleaned the dishes. Tomorrow he would wake up early, start prep work, and open the hearth for another day of service. He would feed people, protect them with warmth and food and safety. It wasn't heroic, it was just honest work. And that was enough.